So you realize that the ultimate is having an agentic AI embodied that actually allows it to do the video setup for the podcast.
Oh my God. That's what we really, that's what the convergence of humanoid robots and agentic AI would be like, please, robot, go set up the podcast studio, please.
And we'll swan in 20 minutes later and just sit down and record.
Although, do you think over time, would the AI robot start getting annoyed? Like, you humans, you never show up in time. You know what? This podcast doesn't need you.
So this will be the Leahy test for intelligence and awareness. So we've ditched the Turing test. I learned this last week about the Garland test based on Alex Garland's Ex Machina to test a robot. So now we've got the Leahy test, which is where your agentic robot is tapping his fingers and say, come on. Yes.
It's the human annoyance meter.
Right, that's right, yes. The more capacity it has for being annoyed and snarky.
It's like we don't have to worry so much about being turned into paper clips. It's more of like we just get dumped by the robots.
So there is a link here which takes us down a rabbit hole, which we won't go down today, of serious cybernetics. I'm just thinking about going back to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Some of those sort of personality modules in the robots. That is, I think, where we're heading.
Oh my God! Everyone I personally, we need a Marvin, and the sulking. Well, why bother with it's like my mind is whatever. I have the potential to understand the true natures of the galaxy, but you humans, why bother?
So why is nobody talking about making Marvin? Effectively, that's what all these companies like Tesla and Figure are aiming for. But they're aiming for this home help. They're going to give us Marvin.
Well, I think by discussing it, we've put a flag in the sand that we came up with this idea first,
right? Yes,
but if we'd love to partner with any multi-gajillion dollar industry.
If Elon Musk is listening, here's the next project.
Anyone's got a cool billion or two lying around. It's just, this has nothing to do with that, but just considering how much money is floating.
Right.
I saw recently, Mira Murati, who left OpenAI, started her own call. I think it's called like intelligent or thinking machines or something like that.
Yes, yeah.
Which, by the way, I've looked. That must be really hard to get the domain name for those things. Like they must be paying a huge amount of money for that. Anyway, but they're just a $2 billion seed funding on like a $10 billion valuation. They have no product.
But there are a number of these AI companies now that have been founded by these big AI megastars that claim that they are going to create the ultimate sort of AGI, and they're attracting billions.
Literal billions of dollars. And that's not a $2 billion valuation.
Right.
That's $2 billion in cash.
I know.
With a $10 billion. They've done nothing. This, and
as far as you know,
that's true. Marvin's in their basement,
most definitely in stealth mode.
This also might be a good time to announce that Modem Futura is officially an AI company. We've done it too. Someone give us $2 billion, and I think we'll be set. Don't worry, you'll get we'll do something.
Well, yes.
I don't know. It's crazy.
Anyway, all this is a really nice lead into talking about agentic AI today.
Well, and I think too, I'm like, Modem Futura, we've been in summer July mode.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, why? AI had a whole crazy week, and now we have tons of stuff to talk about.
We do.
Taking us away of like science fiction books, although we did work Hitchhikers in already, so that's a win.
Yep.
But I'm like, I feel like this has turned into like the wet, hot AI summer.
Oh God, that doesn't sound right somehow. You don't want to take another take.
It sounds a little filthy or something, doesn't it? But I'm like, I don't know. Maybe that's the show title for this thing. I don't know. No. Anyway, I think we've got a lot to talk. So why don't we take a quick break and we'll roll the intro, and then we'll dive into, because we got a whole bunch of stuff to talk about. And the task will be, can we do this in a reasonable amount of time?
Okay. Okay.
We'll mark the clock.
Put a figure on it. Yes.
Okay. All right. We'll look at the clock. All right. All right, well, I'm Sean Leahy, joined with my co-host extraordinaire,
Andrew Maynard,
and that
not a bot.
Not a bot. No, have we passed the CAPTCHA? We're CAPTCHA proofed? But that means this is Modem Futura, the show that explores the intersection of technology, society, and the possible, probable, and preferable futures, asking deep questions like, what will it mean to be human in the future? And how will we continue to prove that you are not a bot?
We are really human.
You know,
yes. Or does anybody care anymore?
So I literally this morning clicked on a YouTube video. It happened to be one of our own podcasts.
Okay.
And it blocked it saying, you need to sign in to prove you're not a bot. And I'm like, not only am I not a bot.
This is my video. I'm on it.
I made this. I made it. I posted it. It's here. And it's me clicking it, which maybe that's a little embarrassing to admit. But but nonetheless.
Where he came up saying, you have already clicked on 200 of these in the last 5 minutes.
Dear Sean, we suspect you of being a bot farm trying to goose your ratings or something. I'm like, no, I was
wondering why those ratings are so high.
Geographically, there's a hot spot right in this suburb of Phoenix, Arizona. There's a hot spot. But yeah, no, that's potentially me. But yeah, anyway, well, first of all, welcome back from your trip.
Yes.
And we're saving, I'm not going to ask you too much about it because we're going to save that we've got another episode we're recording
guest coming in,
with a guest that we can dive deep into that. But yeah, I mean, while you were gone, I feel like so many things were happening. I literally started, I've got a list written down because I'm like, oh, we should talk about this. We should talk about this. So let me just throw out a bunch of things.
Yep.
And then you tell me which one you want to talk about first.
Okay.
Maybe I'll work backwards chronologically. Yesterday, the White House dropped their 2025 AI action plan, which is it's less than 24 hours old-ish, and it's already sent ripples through everywhere.
It has, with some very interesting responses, going all the way from this is absolutely fantastic to what the heck is the US doing?
Yeah, so we've got that. Then if we switch over to like OpenAI specifically, we have their new agent mode.
We do.
Which I've been playing with, you've been playing with.
Yes,
I have thoughts. And also lots of questions.
Right.
We have, did you catch the announcement that they have moved with a partnership with Instructure? So that's the company that does Canvas, the learning management system.
Yes, I saw that.
Which I was a little surprised that hasn't happened yet.
Right,
but so there's that coming up. And also OpenAI announcing that they're in the consulting business now.
Right.
So we've got that. And then on the top of that, we've got another thing with basically...
Just hold on a second. So the consulting business... So you know what that means. You pay them $100,000 and some intern types it into ChatGPT.
That's right. I'll take... what is your business problem?
Right. Tap, tap, tap.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Well, but I think some of those also lead into another topic we can cover too, if we have time. Because already those things, I don't know if we'll get through all those. But also sort of a broader call that maybe these AI companies are in financial trouble. I don't know. Dun, dun, dun. Cue the suspense.
Do you have any evidence for that, or is this just pure speculation? The fact that there's a lot of money going in, and we're not quite sure.
I think facts. I don't personally have them, but I think some of the interesting headlines on that are comparing essentially like the 2007, 2008 sort of subprime market collapse.
Yes,
with
I saw that. Actually,
basically,
yes.
I mean the gist of that, which we can get into a little bit too. Is there's incredible amount of money flowing, no profit, and where's it all going? And how long can you sustain that?
So the big question then is AI a pyramid scheme?
Yeah. Well, and when you start getting desperate, do you have to start spinning up consulting businesses to pay the bills? I don't know.
Okay, so then the question is, how many listeners are we losing at this point, and how many are we gaining at this point?
Oh, we're gaining them. We're gaining them faster than we can handle.
This is going to be the cynical AI episode. I can feel it in my bones now.
Well, but I would say that plays a very critical role because I think one of the ways that we can fight against or burst the hype bubbles that surround these things, and again, for our listeners and anyone new to the show, that is something that I've been talking about for 40 plus episodes now. I feel like is what the danger of all these things is the hype, because that is where you overextend the possibilities, which you have no ability, and then the repercussion of that is it's damage.
And it's tough because if you're looking at tech product development, there has to be a certain amount of hype. I mean, this is actually there doesn't have to be, but this is what Silicon Valley is built on. Yeah. You overpromise, and then you hope that you actually catch up with the promise before you deliver. And it's worked to a certain extent. The trouble is when it gets so big that everybody, 8 billion, well, not 8 billion people, but metaphorically 8 billion people are watching you.
Yep.
That, I think, is when you hit the danger point, when
Yes.
the hype takes over.
Well, and then I think, it extended to that too, is when you have these knock-on effects where, again, this is not a new topic or a new angle from our perspective on this show, but is when you bring in that sort of mythic quality of something that is being overhyped,
right.
which is then you start going, well, it must be better than what? Better than before. In this case, in some arguments, people are saying it's better than the human version of whatever is being done. And why is it? Because it is.
Right.
And then you're like, well, that doesn't make sense.
And you get the arguments that we have to do this.
Right.
Sort of no question. We have to do this as a species, as humanity, as our obligation to the future.
Yeah, it's inevitable.
But no critique as to why.
Yeah.
So interestingly, this is actually a nice segue into the AI action plan that was released by the White House yesterday. Because the first paragraph in the introduction there is effectively this hype. Artificial intelligence is going to change everything. It's going to cure disease. It's going to solve problems. It's going to extend our understanding of the universe. It's going to make life better in every possible way.
Yeah.
Therefore, we have to invest as much as possible in it and go as fast as possible. And when I wrote about this, I published a piece yesterday. I actually didn't focus too much on that because this is par for the course for certainly the US government. And I've seen this over the last 20 years with other technologies, including nanotech, where I was very heavily invested. That you put out these sort of policy statements and these sort of strategic plan statements, and you hype everything up. So for instance, we were going to cure cancer by 2015 using nanotechnology.
Yeah.
But the reality is that opening paragraph just adds to the hype. No question at all.
Yep.
AI is going to be the solution to everything.
Yep. Yeah, it definitely fuels that. And the funny thing is, if you read, I don't know exactly who was part of drafting this language, but if you read some of those other manifestos,
Sam Altman.
Oh yeah, I mean that was what I was going to say. I mean, even going back, I don't know when this was now, less than a year ago, there was that. Maybe it was close to a year, maybe less. I can't remember when Sam Altman released that manifesto, claiming that this is the year of AGI and all that crap.
Beginning of this year in one of his blog posts.
Yeah, and it's some of that same exact tone, certainly the tone, if not some of that same language, is in there. Again, do that same thing of this is the pinnacle. This is going to happen. Therefore it justifies all of the things we're about to
see. That's it.
In some ways, right? That's a normal tactic of you're trying to convince somebody that whatever you're about to propose is necessary or needed, or I mean,
so there is actually another Hitchhiker's Guide link here. I mean, you create the crisis to generate the impetus, and the crisis here is we have got to do this, otherwise we fail as a species.
That's right.
And in Hitchhiker's Guide, there was a beautiful episode in the sort of second half of the radio series where it talks about society realizing that they can't do anything until they've created a crisis. So you actually have this whole industry around creating personal crises.
Oh my God, I love it. This is the best plan. We just keep peppering these.
Right.
Well, also, just a testament and a love letter to Hitchhikers, where it is applicable to almost any of these conversations. I mean, it's such a brilliant piece. But yeah, so the U.S. bill is basically split into 3 pillars.
Yes, and it's an action plan rather than a bill. So it's just the White House sort of saying this is what the plan is.
This is what the plan is, and this is where we should be putting our effort and attention. Do you want me to go through the pillars, or do you want to?
Yeah, you've got them in front of you. Sure. So sort of you can touch on the 3, then we can sort of dive in.
Sure. So the main element, so basically here, so pillar 1 is accelerate AI innovation.
Yes.
Basically, it's a detailed set of actions to encourage rapid development and adoption of AI across the economy while keeping U.S. values. Key term there.
We'll come back to that in a second because there are lots of sort of discontinuities in this, but yes.
And so the key themes in here, just kind of quickly, are things like removing regulatory barriers.
Yes.
This one is, I think, quite loaded. Protecting free speech and encouraging. It's like, well, who's free speech? But
free speech as long as it's American values-based free speech.
Yeah.
Basically, that's the thing. And this is one of the contradictions. Sort of, we are going to develop AIs that protect free speech, but you're not allowed to talk about climate change. You're not allowed to talk about DEI. Diversity. You're not allowed to talk about, well, I forget what else is on the list.
Yeah.
So there's a whole list of things that you're not allowed to talk about in free speech.
Yeah, right. Yes. It's a censored free speech list.
And it's got to be based on American values, sort of air quotes.
Yes. Right. And as a nation that's as geographically dispersed and as just I'm like, and what is that?
Right.
Right. Other pieces of that first pillar are accelerate adoption and worker support.
Yes.
So working with the actual workforce side of things.
Yep.
Invest in AI-enabled science and next-gen manufacturing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then the last one of that pillar is developing AI evaluation ecosystem,
right.
which I thought actually I was actually surprised to see that evaluation criteria in there.
We should be upfront here because I mean it's easy to pull this apart, and I have very, very serious reservations about the action plan, and yet there are aspects of it which are good and important.
Yep.
And it actually wouldn't take that much to reframe it into something that was positively generative.
Sure.
It's just that there's a very, very specific framing that I think takes us down a really weird pathway, including the regulation stuff, where basically they're saying it's so important that we go fast that we can't be stopped by those really inconvenient regulations that make sure we're not going to harm people or the environment.
Exactly. And I think I think that's one of the big, and to put it out there, right? No policy or no plan drafted by a governmental agency would be like, this is perfect.
Yes.
Of course not, right? Yeah. But within there, but I think that's the issue is when we look at this, and as it sits too, it'll kind of sort of marinate in our minds as we kind of we're like, what does this actually mean? But then also connecting it to other things that are happening simultaneously. Because again, remember it was 6 months ago ish was the Stargate announcement of like this huge $500 billion AI infrastructure, whatever. And so already you can see in this, you can see the breadcrumbs that come back from that sort of
course,
because that was a televised fanfare thing of like this is, and you can see how that fits directly into pillar one, which is like, we'll remove the regulation, we'll build the biggest things, and we'll push.
And of course, in all of this, and this comes out in pillar 2 and pillar 3 as well, this is all about US exceptionalism. The whole thing basically says US has got to win. The whole language here is the language of races and winning and war. So it basically says the US has got to win at everything. We have got to not only be the best in the world, we have got to position ourselves so everybody comes to us and is effectively subservient to us because they have to use our technology, our know-how, our systems.
And if people aren't aware, I mean, even at present, like the U.S. has somewhat of a stranglehold even on the tech, the literal chips that are built to do so, like NVIDIA and others who are making these, highly sought after GPUs and other sort of specifically designed AI chips. There are rules about, just like there are for other technologies or weapons.
With dual use technologies, there are restrictions on who can
buy them, who can use them. And then, of course, that was a controversial decision a few months ago. Earlier in the summer, maybe May or June, where they approved a huge sale of them to Saudi Arabia. And not that by itself is an issue, but there's always, it's interesting to watch that geopolitical.
I know there are geopolitics
because
here.
Once you move these chips to someone, then it's like, well, then how do you track where they're using,
So this is also where it gets interesting. So a little bit of a diversion here. So yes, the US is dominating in the hardware generation and the chip production in particular, but two things to be aware of. One is you're having countries like China catching up really rapidly, both with the hardware, but also optimized software systems that run on those. But also those chips require access to rare earth metals.
Who has those?
And China really controls the supply chain on those. So it gets more complex, but it gets even more complex still. So to get those rare earth minerals from where they're mined to where they're used, you have to look at global supply chains. And one of those global supply chains is now the Open Northwest Package.
Northern Passage.
That goes sort of around at the top of the US. Now, you have to ask the question, who controls shipping through that passage? At the moment, the US is doing okay, but you look at the strategic countries there, Canada and Greenland. If China was able to cut deals with those countries to allow that movement, that deeply affects the US. So now you begin to wonder, what is the US strategy for making sure they have a hold over Greenland and Canada.
Well, I think we saw part of it was literally saying, I think at one time both of those nations were suggested to become a state.
Yes, strange that. Yes, so, but actually, it tells you maybe there's more strategic thinking to some of these things than you might imagine.
I mean, you just work this back, you're like, aha! So they were, again, the breadcredcrumbs are all there.
And people have written about this.
Oh yeah,
ideas, yes,
and Greenland, yeah, it's very interesting when you start to see, you're like, so the motive behind that is, of course, is this political, this moving machinery of all these different bits and parts of like,
that's it.
Yes. Right. I mean, we can't build the chips. I mean, the chips are manufactured usually like at chip foundries in China, in Indonesia, wherever they might be. Then brought to the U.S. and then not allowed to be sold back to the country that literally manufactured them. So,
and this action plan strengthens that. It basically sort of increases the U.S.'s ability to sort of hold on to the stuff, which actually gives the U.S. power in this domain.
Sure. And again, depending on how you look at that, right, you could say, well, yes, of course, this is a global strategic advantage. You could also look at it and be like, well, this is just going to slow down. It depends on, I think, some of it too, which we can talk about kind of when we get through this, is also just from the bigger picture, from the perspective of humans, collectively.
Right.
Like, what is the goal? Is the goal truly to create the most powerful, whatever that means, artificial intelligence that we're capable of making, or is it really more surface level, more shallow? It's about control.
See, that's it. And I think as we go through pillars 2 and 3, we'll begin to sort of see where this policy lands the US.
And pillar 2, titled "Build American AI Infrastructure."
Right. Yes.
So there's no hiding that, right?
But this is an interesting one because it actually begins to look at, I believe this is one that looks at education and the workforce and everything, is it? Yes.
So, I mean, just the key themes within this pillar, right? So streamlining, so some boring stuff, right? But it's like streamlining permitting for data centers and chip infrastructures, just rubber stamping, green lighting, these things without as much sort of red tape. But again, when you get into the nitty gritty of that, that's what we'll start to see things where you're like, using like a proposal to use federal lands for data centers, right?
Yes,
like, you might not think about that, but then you're like, wait a minute, what is it? What does that exactly mean?
Right.
And which federal lands? And does that mean like Yellowstone is going to, put in a server farm?
But now federal lands are seen as a resource for AI.
Because wasn't it Mark Zuckerberg and Meta, like the big data, a 5 gigawatt or whatever plant it was like, it's basically almost the size of Manhattan,
right? In
terms of like its square footage that he's going to build somewhere out in like the Wyoming or something, right? So that's a little unnerving, just in terms of what is
just the size,
just the size and the scale, and also again asking these questions of what are we willing to sacrifice to get something in the end, right?
That's right. And of course, one of the things that came out there is you look at both energy and water usage. And so with energy usage, the action plan basically says we've got to build fast. In fact, I think that the tagline was "Build, baby, build" when it comes to AI. But they don't mention where the energy is going to come from, and the underlying current is any energy from anywhere as long as it's enough. So no talk of energy transitions from non-renewables to renewables. No talk about the effective use of renewables. It was basically, we need as much energy as possible, as fast as possible, with the assumption that if that means coal, you use coal. If it means oil, you use oil. If it means nuclear, you use nuclear. Whatever. Yes. Small modular reactors. SMRs.
SMRs. I mean, literally, one of this idea is literally calling for creating a new category of exclusions for power. So if you're like, it's for AI, they're like, oh, well then just, burn it all down. That's fine.
That's right. Yes.
With that, that goes kind of hand in hand with that is upgrading power grid and energy. So,
which actually, that's something that needs to be done.
That's something that needs to be done.
The whole sort of energy system needs to be overhauled and sort of brought into the 21st, 22nd century.
Sure.
But you've got to do that in a holistic way. You don't just do it in a very, very narrow-minded way.
Yeah, and I think, for me, I think there's the big sort of danger with that is that what you would end up with is not new power systems for municipalities.
Right.
But isolated, targeted, high-end SMRs for that data center. and that data center only.
Yes.
And so it's sort of
you're going to have power deserts, like you have food deserts. You're going to have communities sitting next to one of the biggest power plants in the world, and yet not being able to get enough electricity because it's not tapping into it.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. So, so the hope is, right? I mean, again, this is not a bill that is directly, but it's the hope is that when people realize, like, oh, we do need to up, because I mean, the electrical grid entirely, if you look at it, I mean, parts of it are so old and so outdated that this is, I think that's one of those things like, as a society, we would benefit greatly from newer, more modernized energy systems, so long as we get the benefit of that.
It's so frustrating for those people that have been working for decades on energy transitions, looking at really innovative solutions such as distributed energy generation and distribution. So all of their work is basically sort of pushed aside with this that says we just got to build big and build fast.
Yeah. I mean, even just going back to the WEF top 10, I mean, a couple of those were these really cool, innovative ways of naturally extracting more energy out of like waves and water and stuff like that. And it sort of is like, we'll just... that's for tomorrow. For today, we got to
play around with that if you want, but
we got to burn it.
Build, baby, build, burn, baby, burn.
It kind of feels like those movies or cartoons or whatever, where you're like stranded in that cabin. You're like, we're running out of firewood. We're like, get the furniture, burn it all. And it's like just looking for anything that's combustible at this point. Throw it in the fire. I don't know.
Yes.
But so then I'll go quickly through the rest of these. So also, it's called restoring semiconductor manufacturing. But again, this continued push of bringing chip manufacturing to the U.S., which here in Arizona, we're kind of have a front row to a lot of this with the CHIPS Act.
Well, of course, this is the funny thing. You had the CHIPS Act under Biden
administration,
which really led to a massive injection of innovation and cash, including chip manufacturing.
Yep.
And now the message is, Biden got it all wrong. We have to do this differently, but it looks remarkably the same.
Pretty much, we're just relabel it, and then and that's what we're not going to get in the politics of that business, but I mean, I feel like that's so often the case, because you're like, this is a good idea, but we want to tweak it. We'll move it one thing to the left, and now it's new.
Yes.
High security data centers, good, more intelligent workforce and infrastructure build out.
So the workforce build out is the one to watch, I think, from a university perspective, sitting here in a major US university, because if there is money attached to this, and we're already beginning to see money attached to educational initiatives around AI, I think you're going to see a rebranding of a lot of degree programs, where the idea is whatever you teach, if you slap AI and AI skills development on it, you think you're going to get the money and the students.
Well, we do run an AI podcast.
Right.
Yes. I'll just put out the change collector right here, and we'll just watch the stable coin.
Building US AI infrastructure week by week.
We're gonna build, and we're gonna watch those. We're gonna watch that stable coin just flow in. But that's going to be interesting, because, and again, I mean, that's for me one of the things, like the red flag that jumps up is like, this is fuel for hype machines. Because what you will see is, I think you've accurately predicted, is everything will just slap the term AI onto it.
Yes.
Whether, I mean, I don't think a lot of things might not even change other than the name.
That's it.
In the hopes that would be enough. Which I really, because then that just devalues so much when that happens.
But the other thing with this, very, very strategically, which I wrote about, is I think you are going to see this move to slap AI on a lot of degree programs. But I think a lot of people will see through just the new branding. So it's those programs that have been investing and building up an AI base for the last 2 to 4 years that are going to thrive. And the ones that are only just coming to the party now and just slap that term on, whether it's AI innovation or whatever, I think they're going to deeply struggle, because they're at least 2 years too late.
That's true. I hope that's the case. I mean, I hope that this, because I mean, if done well with care, this could be a phenomenal.
No, and I'm not critiquing this. I mean, I think again it needs to be seen in a much broader context. But yes, there are needs here from developing skills, developing workforces, developing opportunities, which are really important.
Yep, and all the way down from also, again, from the higher education perspective, all the way down to like, into like the trades as well, in terms of like the new types of technologies, whether that be new kinds of like HVAC and cooling systems and engineering around because I think, I mean, if this goes the way it's supposed to, and this money does get invested and we start putting all these resources in there, I mean, it's going to take a massive pipeline to keep this. I mean, part of that goal, right, is to keep these things essentially contained within one country,
right?
Which ultimately, I mean, for the last, I mean, it's decades long, manufacturing and all these other things have been outsourced to other countries, that have built up expertise specifically around how to do these things. I mean, electronics are a prime example,
right?
Even if it was decided, yes, we're going to move all, you know, all Apple products are going to be built in the US, it would take 10 years minimum.
We don't have the skilled workforce, but we don't have the skilled workforce who are willing to be paid the wages that are going to come with it, which actually aren't going to be that high.
And again, you look at these things historically, I mean, there's an economic incentive of when countries offload those to other nations who are, so I mean,
I know,
So I think but again, I think investment in workforce, and that's actually, always good.
It makes sense. Yeah. And I just one final interesting twist to that, which actually isn't in the action plan, but I think it's an extension of it, is the question of, is the university degree the best way to develop the skills that are necessary?
That's a good question.
And I think if the US is serious about investing in the workforce, they also have to be serious about how people get those skills in what are currently unconventional ways, rather than sticking to the old conventional academic way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you could easily make an argument too with the speed and things that are happening too, like how long can you wait to get into, like, you know, once you're of legal age to be working professionally, et cetera, like how long can you wait before you can dive in if that's
if you're 18 and you do a 4-year degree, the world is going to be so different in 4 years.
Yep. And then, and you don't, I mean, it just raises that question. Right. I don't know. I don't have an answer.
Well, you know the answer, Sean. You've already said it. Listen to Modem Futura. Right. You'll get all the skills you
don't
need.
need anything else.
Direct injection to the brain.
That's right. We just either the neural link you just plug in, you know, that's all you need. That's, you know, we're the closest thing to the Matrix. You know, if you want to just dial up something, just plug into us.
Not that we're going on the hype train in any way whatsoever.
You know, if you can't beat them, join them. We are the #1 AI, but, you know, whatever. I don't know. The last piece on there I'll just toss is cybersecurity and secure by design AI, which of course, you know, that's when that's where you see all like the DoD, DHS, all the, you know, we have to do this in a way.
Which is all important stuff. But again, it's a yes, it's important. And there's a lot more stuff that needs to be
and there's a lot. And then pillar 3 is lead in international AI diplomacy
which
and security.
I love this one because I mean, I'm realizing that I am so naive. I thought that diplomacy was something that it's not. I thought diplomacy was all about negotiation and compromise and working out win-win solutions.
Isn't it carry a big stick?
Diplomacy in this case is working out how the US has AI supremacy. So it talks about our allies or the US's allies and basically
AI
making sure that through this diplomacy, the allies do everything we want them to do. And it talks about the US's adversaries and making sure that we can beat the adversaries. So diplomacy is either you're with us or we're going to beat you.
I mean, and you know, there is something slightly odd to this also when, you know, again, in recent years, there has been a lot of retreat from global partnerships.
Right.
So, you know, it's sort of like, oh, well, that list of allies, I think, has gotten smaller.
Right.
Intentionally.
I was actually wondering who those allies are because we've annoyed so many people around the world.
I know. It's like
it should have been ally singular. Yes.
We'll see. Or maybe it'll bring people back to the table.
Let us know if you are that ally.
You know, it'll bring people back to the table.
Maybe,
you know. But yeah, I mean, the key themes under there, you know, I don't think are surprising. It is, as you mentioned, it's export to AI. Export the AI to allies. It's specifically countering Chinese influence and advocate U.S. values.
Yes, and China is very clearly the adversary here. We're seen as the adversary.
Yes. And strengthen export controls, again, clamping down on who's allowed to get access to the equipment, to the, you know, the intelligence of it. I mean, the funny thing is you can even look at this sort of this battle, if you will, between like the U.S. and Chinese over TikTok. Right. I mean, we won't touch the fact that a bill has been passed and
nothing has happened.
And nothing has happened. Okay, that's a separate issue, which is perhaps political and legal, to which I don't have the expertise to speak on.
Yep.
But with that whole argument of it has to be sold and controlled by a U.S. company, even China at the time was like, fine, but you're not getting the algorithm,
right?
Because that is the intellectual property that has created all of to which TikTok's success is essentially pinned on how well that algorithm worked. And so it is interesting that they're even in a layer that is sort of like social media entertainment. That is the currency is the brain power, if you will, of this algorithm. And so it just sets up this interesting thing where like that's what we're really clamping down on, the export or trade of these, these little computer programs that essentially have no, I mean, it's not a tangible thing.
Right. Yes.
Which is just kind of, I find that kind of humorous.
It is interesting. Yes.
Obviously in align protection measures with allies, national security evaluations, and all those kind of sort of traditional things that are very, very government, political, geopolitic related, national security related. I mean, those are, I think none of that was a surprise.
Right.
Those bits are in there that we want to do it. We want to do it the best, and we want to control and not let this out the door. And, and it's funny because when I was reading this, like the way my brain kept like making sense of it was thinking about if we thought of AI as essentially nuclear weapons, right? That it is in some ways. And I would be curious at the sort of big policy layer, globally, like if that's the new Cold War, right? Is like this rush.
I think I think there are interesting analogies there. I also think it's very different in some ways, simply because of the porosity of barriers that you see with data flow, information flow, knowledge flow with AI that you simply don't see with nuclear weapons. And so just capturing that, one of the things that I thought was really interesting in the action plan was its support for open source and open access.
And open weights,
So open source, the idea that if you have a really big AI model, you release all the sort of internal sort of connections, the things that make it what it is. So other people can use that. And of course, this is a big push coming from companies like Meta. OpenAI have actually pulled back from doing that because they see it as too big a social and a security risk. But it's very interesting that the US government is really backing open source at the same time as clamping down on all of these things that people shouldn't be doing with AI.
Yeah. No, it is interesting. And I think, I mean, to your point too, I guess one of the things that struck me as well is how, while I was reading it and kind of looking at that analogy in my mind about like the end product of controlling it the way you would a nuclear weapon or some other advanced, weapon that gives you some sort of global strategic advantage. But also with AI, with this kind of stuff, it's not like the other traditional things that have been the result of hard science, right? Where it is, you can tell how potentially you can tell how far away you are from a technological or a scientific breakthrough or an advancement. Even going back to the origins of OpenAI and hitting on GPT-3, right? It was kind of like, it just kind of happened.
I know.
It's like they were working hard and doing lots of things, but it wasn't this. It's not such a clear pathway to creating new things.
It's actually really muddy because, of course, you've got decades of deep academic research leading into these, but you've also got this really interesting layer of commercialization. So now what you're seeing emerging is a combination of deep far horizon research, close to horizon product development, and then experimentation around that. So it doesn't fit into a neat box of this is the research, this is the translation into a product. And then you've got the emergent properties that come from that tinkering around with the product development as much as anything.
And it's interesting because it is. It's like it's almost like, it's in many ways, it's somewhat speculative of, we've got we think we have the ingredients, right? We've got the compute, we've got people, we're making things, and we're just going to hope something bubbles up out of that.
And then you've got the layer of the have to go as fast as possible, because as soon as you've got a product that you don't fully understand and you're under pressure to go even faster, you don't have the luxury of another 5-10 years of doing the research to develop fundamental principles. You've just got to suck it and see. You've got to go into that lab and say, what happens if we bolt this together with this? And what weird things happen and how can we use them? So immediately, all of that scientific rigor and that engineering rigor go out of the window because you just have to produce something as fast as possible, which is possibly why we're seeing what we're seeing with X's Grok at the moment.
Well, it's funny. I can never remember where I heard this. I need to look it up so I can actually attribute it. But somewhere I remember there was like this little joke about, the last words spoken before the annihilation of all humankind was two scientists in a lab, and one of them saying, "What happens if I do this?" Or something to that effect.
Well, yes.
Like, because it is a little bit of that of like, well, if you just
now it's the 18-year-old intern.
Yeah. What happens if I hit? It's like, what if I do this code and hit enter, and all of a sudden,
So just getting back a little bit to the action plan, because this is important stuff, but it's also high-level policy stuff, and who knows how it's going to sort of come down into reality. But also there's the question of what does it mean to everyday people? Somebody who occasionally uses ChatGPT or something, does this mean anything to them whatsoever?
I don't think so. I'd be curious. I mean, we'll find out. I mean, I think at least initially, I don't see anything in that plan that would have direct actionable. Especially because OpenAI is an American company, right? So they're already within that bubble.
But it does mean that the world around just casual users is changing in a way that is potentially out of their control, and how that sort of begins to crystallize into a future. Somebody else is calling the shots in terms of how their lives are going to unfold.
Yeah, that's true. And it was interesting too. So I looked at this also, and I had which we can talk about when we get to it. I had ChatGPT's Agent AI do a quick comparison for me. So I have the crib notes here from it.
Okay.
Because I said, compare this with the EU AI Act a year ago, right? And that was interesting because the EU Act is really sort of based or adopting this like risk-based regulatory framework, right? So saying move forward unless there's basically a hint that whatever you're doing could have catastrophic or significant harms.
Yes.
And if it has those harms, you need to
be a bit careful.
Yeah. Basically, now the regulation comes in to clamp down to make sure you can't unintentionally do something bad.
Yes.
Which, I mean, that's a direct difference between those approaches.
I know, yes.
Which I also, I think culturally also says a lot between, it's not surprising maybe.
In technical terms, it's precautionary on the EU side, which doesn't mean stop. It means if it looks like there's going to be a big problem, be careful, versus the permissionless approach in the US, which basically says go as fast as you possibly can. And if something bad happens, we'll work out what to do with it then. Yes.
We'll create another system to solve it.
We'll make sure it happens somewhere else.
Yeah, that's right. And if you think about like, when we say like risk-based things, so not thinking hand-wavy existential things, but it's things like social scoring, emotional recognition, inappropriate use of facial recognition software, observing people's behavior in work or schools, things that would,
And so I contrast to that in the US version, there was only one risk mentioned. There was anything like that. In fact, there were two risks other than the risks of the US not going fast enough. One was a biosecurity risk, the danger of people using advanced AI models to put together pathogens and dangerous molecules, which it specifically called out. But the other one was deepfakes. But not just deepfakes within legal proceedings. And I found it fascinating that the one thing it focused on is the one thing that actually threatens officials in the administration. If they are potentially caught up in legal proceedings and somebody sort of provides evidence which is actually AI generated.
According to Midjourney, look, you did do these things.
Apart from the fact, I'm sure everybody will recognize the slight irony here with the leader of the current administration freely sharing deep fakes of his adversaries.
I know. In some ways, we are just living the irony of a Hitchhiker's Guide. I mean, it's just, it is, like, oh my gosh. There are times where you're just like, is this, we need Riz back on this. We're like, this is a simulation, right? Like, there's no way that this
is a branch that's gone slightly wrong. It's going to be terminated at some point. Or it's a weird experiment.
Right?
They say, what happens if?
This,
But yes, you look at that, and yes, deepfakes are a really big issue. They're a big issue way beyond just the judicial system. But they're only one of a whole raft of things where you could have very serious personal social consequences if we get AI wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading there was an article, it was a while ago now. I'll dig it up and try to see if I can find it and put it in the show notes. But again, with this idea of deepfakes, that how do you combat this right now too, with the ubiquity of, a tool that we've used here, we use it here for a podcast, especially when we do like remote stuff. We use a tool called Riverside. Great. It's a wonderful, shout out to the Riverside folks. It's a wonderful tool. They're constantly putting new features. And one of the things that they've done in those is they're partnering with AI companies like HeyGen and things like that. So when you have a flub, which, neither one of us are ever known to do that, but, in the editing, you can fix it it'll fix the video of your mouth.
Right.
But you can also change. So, you can literally just change the script and change what comes out after that. So it's a deep fake-ish where it's like you may have, but also if you have the right content, I mean, what's to stop you from just recreating anything? And I remember going, this was 2000, I think it was like 2014 at an Adobe Max conference, seeing Adobe had piloted this similar type of technology back then, which was for fixing audio transcript stuff or issues where, again, you said 2008 instead of 2004. That's right,
and you can flip it,
And you can flip it. And then, of course, then Jordan Peele did this really funny, humorous impersonation of Barack Obama. And it was, but the whole thing was like, you don't, with this technology, and that was 10 years ago.
Right, yes.
And now,
it's just becoming easier.
It's so easy. I mean, I remember we used to teach a segment about deepfakes to undergraduate students, and this was 5 years ago.
Right.
And even back then, it was like, deepfakes are getting so much easier that with $20 and whatever, you could hire someone with a machine capable of doing it. You can now, the tools are at anyone's disposal. I mean, it's not even, doesn't even cost that money anymore. So it is quite wild. But I saw it was, I think the country of Denmark had passed a law that allowed everyone to essentially copyright their own their own image.
So you can sue somebody if they use your
apparently
image or likeness?
That would be the idea, so that while there may not be a technological tool, there could be a legal tool where at least if that happened to you, you could seek damages or something to that effect, which, I was thinking about that. I'm like, that's an interesting, I mean, I think the last thing the United States needs is more, more litigious minded as groups. But it does raise a question. You're like, well, if you are over 18, in the US, which is the threshold as a legal adult. And someone steals your likeness for fun, for harm, for whatever. What is your action of recourse?
Right.
I mean, if you're a big enough person, big enough celebrity, you have already standing legal rights towards your brand and image.
Sure.
If you're just a regular person, what do you do?
Especially if you can't afford the legal fees.
I mean, that's the other thing is like, that's kind of the longstanding joke with fair use, right? Is fair use just means you have the freedom to hire an attorney to argue your case. Right. But with those kind of situations, it really raises that question of like, well, how is this not just playing into the hands of those who have all the wealth can just do whatever? And if you don't have that, you're stuck.
So because I do want to talk about agentic AI, but just to wrap up the AI action plan and what's it mean to sort of everybody who isn't a policy wonk. I think it's questions like this. What is going to slip between the cracks that is actually going to make your life more difficult, potentially more dangerous? What is not being covered? A, what is not being covered? And B, what is happening that is going to make bad things more likely, such as going incredibly fast with systems where we have no idea what the consequences are going to be. And I think that those are questions that everybody should be asking.
Definitely. I 100% agree. I mean, those are the questions you should be asking in your house, your household, with your family members. You should be asking this in your communities, your schools, your whatever. But because I think that's exactly it is, you look at those gaps where it's like build and remove the regulation. And while the big, potentially, the big main players, that might not be a bad thing for them because they're all eyes are on them. It's these opportunistic little things, the weeds that come up through the cracks, right? That are like, aha, I found the loophole for this and for that, and now I've got all your data.
And there are really big loopholes.
That's right. Right. It's like more like a rift, like a giant chasm, you know. But yeah, because then you can see this pathway where bad, you know, immoral, bad actors can operate legally within the bounds, but yet do really nefarious things with that information.
Not even immoral or bad. If you look at opportunists, I mean, this is an entrepreneurial company. Entrepreneurial country. There's a flub that needs to be covered by AI. But it means that anybody that is out to make money, you look at the gaps and the opportunities.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So if there is a gap to create an AI app where you are not constrained by regulation, you are not constrained by legal issues, you can just go for it and you can do anything you like until somebody says maybe you've gone too far. That is an opportunity that any entrepreneur worth their salt would run after. Yeah.
Well, and it's like, you know, you smell the opportunity of money left on a table somewhere. People are going to go get that money.
That's it. Yes. Yep.
Yeah, that's you know, that makes me a little sad, but
and of course, which brings us nicely to agentic AI, seeing that this is the buzzword of the hour, it seems, and every company is trying to create their own agentic AI platform as fast as possible,
whatever that means.
But as we've talked together about, we're struggling to work out what people are going to do with these.
Yeah, so it's one of those things like so if we go back, let's say 6 months to a year, right, when people are like, agentic AI is the new thing. And you're like, well, okay. Like,
and disclaimer, I've written about agentic AI and how it's going to be the new thing.
Yeah. And again, when you look at going back, right, and this leads into a problem I have, you know, in general with this stuff, which is constantly moving a goalpost, which is, you know, the original premise of an agentic AI was that you would have an AGI adjacent, you know, bot or collection of tools that could independently set forth and do tasks that you give it or that someone gives it or it gives itself, whatever the mechanism would be, to achieve stuff independently of input, right?
So it has agency. You can give it a rough idea and it can go away, it can make decisions for itself that align with the goal that you've set it. It can do things, it can spend money, make bookings, sort of build stuff, all with the authority that you gave it originally. So that it has agency to do stuff.
And to date, there's been a few little demos of things here and there.
Yeah, and a couple of companies. So I know I've written about, again, the Chinese company, Manus.
Manus,
there was sort of one of the first companies to really embrace this. And I've used their product quite a lot. So I've got a good sense of what it does and what it doesn't do. But now you've got sort of companies like OpenAI. This last week?
Yeah, it was
just a few days ago.
It was maybe a week ago at most.
Huge announcement of their new AI agent platform. And you're now beginning to see a whole swath of other companies beginning to claim that they have agentic AI.
Yeah, it was just July 17th was when they made the formal announcement. And so OpenAI, the headline is Introducing ChatGPT Agent, Bridging Research and Action.
Right. Yes.
But what's funny is, of course, you know, they get very close, but don't call it an agentic AI.
Yes.
Right. They call it an agent.
Yes.
Which is interesting. So right away, you look at the demo and it shows this little, I'm looking at I'll put the link in the show notes so you can just see their quick little demo. And it's like, pops up this little window and it's like, agent creates the slideshows and spreadsheets and it does all this stuff. And you're looking and you're like, okay, it has this little performative thing. And so instantly I was like, okay, well, I want to try, see what this is all about. And after a few uses and stuff, I literally sat back and go, am I doing this right?
Right.
Because,
because it sucks.
Well, I wouldn't.
I've got to qualify that because the tech is impressive.
Yeah,
and
sure.
So the way that most of these platforms do this is that they will set up a virtual machine, a virtual computer. So then they will they will control this computer and start running it. And most of what they do is based on the internet. So they can go and sort of visit internet sites. But the way that they operate these is as if they're a human. So they'll open a website and they'll actually sort of use optical recognition to identify different elements of that website, and then they can move a cursor and click on buttons and things. So it's like they are an avatar of you surfing the web. very, very slowly. I mean, it's painful to watch sometimes. But the idea is that if they can surf the web, they can click buttons, they can fill in fields, they can make decisions, they maybe have access to your personal data, so they can have access to your email and your calendar and your bank account, possibly. So they can start making decisions on your behalf, all through this sort of virtual web interface. That's typically how these are built.
Yeah. And it, I think in one respect too, first of all, I'd be like crawling these things with these tools. This is why I can't watch my own YouTube videos, because it's like, we think you're one of these. But I would be curious too, right? Like how often, because you're supposed to be able to watch this thing happen. More often than not, when I do it, I don't even get that little window. It skips it.
Right.
And it, so there's some issues there. Yes. But I think this is one of these situations where, again, the overhype, the overpromise, and you can't quite deliver. So what do? You move the goalpost closer, put something out that's not quite what we promised, and then you look at it and you go, oh, well, that's not what I was hoping it was going to be. Because and again, I question, I'm like, am I doing this right?
Right.
Because the uses, I was asking it to create stuff, do stuff, and you're like, besides the performative window that you can interact with,
right? Yes.
The output to me looks no different than just the deep research.
Somewhat. Well, actually, to me it's worse than it. So I like deep research because I have a lot more control over it.
Sure.
But what I'm struggling with here is there are a lot of commentators who have said this is a game changer. Here are 10 ways in which agentic AI is going to change the world.
Yep.
And I look at the examples, and they leave me cold. I mean, you can give it access to your calendar, and at the beginning of each day, it'll tell you sort of where you need to be when, and it can sort of schedule things in. And I do that, and it tells me 12 o'clock lunch. And I could sort of do that a little bit faster.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at it right here. I've got it pulled up, and I'm on O3 Pro, and I click, agent mode.
Yes.
And it's like, the suggested things are, they just flipped on me. That's interesting. Literally, as the list just flipped. Research top refurbished stand mixers under $200 on eBay.
Right.
Okay.
So that is actually quite useful, but you can do that with deep research anyway.
Sure. Create a 4-day San Sebastian itinerary using TripAdvisor. Okay.
And so some of this is useful as a starting point, but you can do it with other systems. But let's be honest. How many billions of dollars do you need to invest in a system that will give you a vacation itinerary that you'll probably throw out of the window anyway, or maybe take one or two hints from?
Yeah. There's one here. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to do it. It says basically research EVs under 45,000. And you click on it and it's this whole, which is also interesting because it gives you insight into the groups that are essentially doing these prompts.
Right.
And when I look at this, instantly I'm like, that's a big prompt. Like my prompts are not usually that large, unless they're like for deep research and very specific. Yes, But it's like this prompt, I clicked on it and it automatically filled it in. I have a 2000 Subaru Crosstrek in really tight garage. Any new cars can't be more than about 20% bigger in length, width, or height. Please look at every 2022 or newer EV or plug-in hybrid. I'm going to see what happens.
20 minutes later. This
that's
could take a long time.
So we'll run that in the background. But,
but I'm looking at these, and maybe I'm being unfair. Maybe this is just the first wave and we'll get really sophisticated systems. And I'm sure there are use cases where this makes sense. But everything I'm looking at, I'm thinking, A, I don't need that, or B, I can do it faster and better myself.
Yeah. And that's what's interesting. I'm watching it do right now. It's literally opening up like cars.com and stuff like, so again, I always get split because I'm like, from a pure tech side, you're like, okay, that's cool.
Yep.
And it was interesting. I saw a little web interview and it had two people from OpenAI. It was an all OpenAI like little panel, and they were explaining a little bit about how they built this feature.
Yep.
And it was basically people from like, I think it was like the deep research team and someone from like the Canvas, like the visual team, just going, well, why don't we just merge our things together and do that? Yep. And I'm like, that's a much better. So perhaps maybe my biggest issue with it is the naming of putting agent in there,
right?
Because again, it's like, are you trying to subtly suggest that this is an agentic tool? Because it's really not.
So I would probably counter that a little bit. And the counter is these tools have the ability to try and infer what you want and actually craft their own way forward. So again, going back to Manus, which I've been looking at the two of them, and I still prefer Manus. I think it has a more sophisticated feel. So with Manus, you give it a task. And first thing it does is break that down into subtasks. So it asks itself, what does the user really want? And what is the sequence of things I need to do to get there? So this is a level of agency where it actually tries to work out how to do that. And it'll actually show you on the screen. It'll break it down into sort of 5, 10 little subtasks. And then as it's going on and it does its research, it'll go back and revise that. If it discovers that what it originally set out isn't going to get it to where it's going to go, it revises the task list. So that is a certain degree of agency. But you can see it happening.
Yeah.
And that is quite exciting because it means you can just give it a 2-liner and it'll sort of, like a really good sort of assistant or colleague, it'll infer what you want and it'll go away and do a lot of the work.
That's just funny. So the page is trying to do something and it just said like, the access to this page has been denied.
So that happens a lot, I find, as well. Yes.
Well, which is potentially good. Yeah. Maybe that these crawlers are adhering to the robot.txt fields to say, please don't. Yes. No, but it is interesting. And I think, one of the things to consider with these types of tools as, again, this one, I think it's an interesting thing to play with.
But I'm struggling for the use case. And again, there may be people. And another example, I remember reading about somebody who said, again, it's Manus, because that was around, saying he had the really expensive several $100s a month application. He said each morning he sets 10 windows going with 10 tasks. And by the time he gets to work, he's got sort of these sort of
like a whole daily rundown of whatever.
So, which is impressive if you live the sort of lifestyle and you have the sort of business where you need to delegate a lot of that heavy lifting to others. You can imagine having a raft of these agents doing things. But I also think there's an incredible skill in working out what you give the agents that is going to be useful and going to be productive.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this sort of evolves over time because the flip side of this, right, is as they become more useful in terms of like, I can give it, the example you gave that just makes me just cringe is I gave it my bank account. Or maybe you give it a credit card or something that you can control with like a limp, there's been enough examples of just children of people running up like $4,000 bills doing in-app purchases, let alone an agentic AI that goes crazy.
Right. Sam Altman did warn people against thinking twice before you give the agent personal information. He didn't say don't. He said think about it. Yes.
Which is good. I mean, informed and be an informed user. But with all these things, right? I mean, and this is not new to an agentic AI, but to anything where the more something knows about us. Also, the flip side is the invasion of privacy.
Right.
Yes, so while we think, if we think about it from an educational standpoint, we're like, oh, well, if a true like AI companion knew everything about us and knew how we learned, wouldn't that be great? Yes, except it also knows everything about you, and maybe we don't want that.
So let me ask you about that, because of course this is the next wave. We've got the simple ones that'll sort of look at your calendar and schedule things, but really sort of one of the things that people are looking at is that AI agent that knows you so well that it can preempt what you want. What is your response to that? If you had an AI that even before you knew you wanted something, you wanted a coffee, you wanted to get somewhere, you had to do something, it preempted that and either did it for you or prompted you.
Yeah, it's unsettling. Yeah. I mean, and to some degree, it also is a reflection of how like the habits we form.
Right.
Because even just on my iPhone, it does things based on time. Right. So it's not an AI system that's doing it. It's literally just essentially, I suppose it's machine learning in that sense.
Yes, it works out what your patterns are.
Yeah, it's not an agentic thing, but it's like, hey, every day at 10 o'clock, you pick your phone up and do this. So therefore, it already sort of has it queued up and you go, or you get these little reminders or things like that.
But now imagine you had the sort of the Uber delivery. So you get into your office and the coffee that you've been buying every day is already on your desk when you
get a little knock. You're like, we thought you'd enjoy this.
Right. Yes.
You're like, well, I didn't give you permission.
$5 on your credit card, $50 for the service.
You're like, I didn't order this, but thank you.
Right.
Yeah. Again, it'll be interesting because, I from just my own personal perspective of that is I look at that with a lot of friction where I'm like, I don't want that.
And I look at it and I think I don't need it. I'm fairly comfortable with my life. I don't need to be 10 times more productive because it takes something away from my humanity.
It does.
And maybe that's the thing, that we're obsessed with this cult of productivity where the idea is, you're never doing enough. Therefore, you've got to have machines that allow you to do more. But maybe the approach should be, how do we live happily within what we can do?
Yeah, I think that's a big piece, because I'm like, again, and I think that's all. There's also a piece there that makes an assumption that these things are things we don't want to do.
Right.
Or that is better for someone else to do. I mean, even going as far as, the promise of, we're seeing this across, like, especially in the education sphere at all levels, right? So higher education, K-12, whatever, is like, oh, we should be embracing the AI because it'll do all the stuff for you, and then it'll make you more productive and more whatever. But I'm like, yeah, but at what cost?
Yes.
There was just an article that just came out, Neil Selwyn and some other authors that were looking at teachers who are using AI and the amount of extra time that they're spending. So it's like, in some domains, AI potentially is a lightning rod of productivity enhancement, right? If you're, looking at data and summarizing data or doing these things that are naturally lent towards benefits for that type of automation. When you're working on something that is like, let's take education, where it is pedagogical in nature, you're thinking deeply about, how do I create learning experiences that translate those sticky moments to my students so that they understand, they get the concept, they get the picture. While AI tools can certainly help, if you just say, I'm making a unit on this subject, make me a lesson plan. Well, as the educator now, you have to go through that, and now you're critiquing, go like, does this work? Oh, I don't know. Should it? Maybe. What some of these studies have shown, and some other studies that were looking at programmers, I think as well, or it was programmers or scientists, I can't remember. Was, while they liked using it, it took them twice as long to do anything, because this productivity gain was completely negated by the need of those professionals to vet and verify that this information was in fact what they wanted.
It's also a quality thing. So for instance, if I get an AI agent to churn out a 50-page report for me on something, if it's an area where I just need a briefing on, that's fine. But if it's something that I'm trying to write from my own expertise, it means I have got to go through every single line, every single word of that to work out where it aligns with my knowledge and my expertise, where it doesn't, and change it. And anybody who does editing knows that editing at a professional level is incredibly time intensive if you want to make sure you've got the accuracy, the facts, the tone, the nuance, and everything there.
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting, because I'm sure we'll start to see more and more now that these tools have been sort of, in the wild for longer. We'll start to see more and more of these things across all kinds of disciplines and all kinds of populations. But I think there's because this is something, as you mentioned with the editing, I feel this way when I use the tool. Same thing as, you're like, wow, that's impressive. Again, from the tech side, cool. And then you go through it and you're like, editing something that you didn't write to ensure that it is of the quality that you expect from a professional standpoint takes so much more cognitive energy than if you write it yourself. Because when you write it yourself, at least it might not be good, but you know what is where.
See, that's exactly it. You've got that model inside your head.
You've got that model. It came from,
and maybe that's it. That if the AI gives you something, you've got to actually create that model. If you're going to do this well, and maybe if you want to sort of
slap it on and
that's fine. But if you want to do it well, you've got to recreate that model in your head from what's been given you, rather than allow it to organically develop.
Because one of the ways I think about it sort of deeply is in this like symbiotic relationship, right? Where it's like, it's my question and I'm prompting this thing to help me dig through it. And then the trap is you get this, depending on how much, right? It could be a page or 50 pages, but you get this really well-written, coherent thing that on surface level looks and sounds great. On deeper investigation, you'll inevitably find pockets of absolute garbage or pretty good, but not quite, or it missed what I was talking about, whatever. And that then comes in this piece, but then you have the struggle of like, can I defend all of these positions or all these parts?
That's right.
If I didn't map them out, then that creates a level of insecurity that I don't know what is in there.
That's exactly it. Yes.
So for me to feel secure about it, I have to go through it at a forensic level.
This is where the agency challenges you.
And then I should have just written the damn thing myself in the first place, because at this time it would have been faster.
Yeah, yeah. So we probably ought to wrap this up fairly shortly, but I want to go back to you touching on education and agentic AI, because of course part of the discussion here is, wouldn't it be wonderful if you had an AI that knew so much about you, or say you're sort of in sort of 8th grade or something, it knew so much about you, so much about your educational learning sort of journey, that it could both prompt you and guide you, but it could also be an interface with your teacher. So it could tell your teacher sort of what was needed.
Yep.
And there are so many people that are invested in this idea. Is this a good idea, or are there serious things that we should be asking about even that level of agency? And even what does agency mean there? Is it the agency of the AI to identify and decide how you should be learning, what you should be learning, in what sort of environment, and how they actually nudge you using different mechanisms in certain ways?
Yeah, I mean, I think so backing up, I remember I gave a talk on this. It was pre-pandemic, so probably 2019-ish or something. And back then, I mean, the culmination of about 30 years of AI and education research was a sort of this like black box known as like an AI tutor, right? That it's this thing, if we could reach this goal, this would mean that tool would know everything about you, the individual, not just who you are, not just what you know, but who you are. So that means like how are you impacted by your emotional states? What emotional state are you currently in? This active sort of datification of your entire self.
Right.
So that as the tool, I could decide if I'm the tool and you're using it, I was like, I know everything about Andrew. I know how he's feeling right now. What is he tired? Is he angry? Is he melancholy? And regardless of what state you're in, how best you might learn and when you might learn. So I can, with the sort of utopian goal here of giving you everything you need when you need it in the best way possible.
Right.
Sounds great.
Right.
But again, the flip side of that is now this thing knows everything about you. What better tool could there be possibly to manipulate you, either on purpose or on on accident?
Yes.
But also, again, some of the questions that you might ask too is like, is this an invasion of self?
Right.
And with that too, right? Like, if you could say this is a on-premise or on-device localized tool that you, the user, have ultimate control of, it's just for you. Right. That's a different conversation than this is something in the cloud owned by a for-profit company doing all this stuff. Yeah. And to what extent does that interface
with American values infused into it?
Yes, exactly. But also, if we think about like distributed sort of computing and sensors, right? Again, this utopian vision of you walk in, you have this little buddy, right? You walk into an environment that can respond to your buddy. To help create a physical environment also that is conducive for you and what you need and your learning and your speed and all these things. But again, who is controlling how these are talking? Right. And if I'm an educator, where's the line of what I should know about you? Right. And where is it invasive beyond like, traditionally you might say, oh, a student is struggling to we call these things interventions.
So if you think of the goals of the agentic AI, what are the goals? Is it to mold you into a certain type of person? I mean, who sets those
and who
goals?
Determines that?
Yeah, and you simply can't say that it's ambivalent and the goals are going to come out of the individual child, because that will never ever happen.
Well, I mean, even if you were to say, right, like every child should go to school and become like pick a famous, wealthy, whatever, pick even a thought. Everyone should be an Albert Einstein, right? Let's go with something that. Well, that's a value judgment beyond belief.
So you aren't getting me into dystopian land here, because one of the logical extensions of this is the AI, centralized AI, decides sort of what is the right balance of skills and abilities for society. And then big question is, who decides that? Because of course, a large part of education is how do you train the workforce so that it's able to make money for the rich and wealthy.
Of course.
But so you have the centralized AI, it decides what that distribution is. Each child that comes in, it begins to work out which pathway it is most likely to go. Is this a child that is going to revel as a laborer, as somebody who makes things, as an intellectual, as a leader? And then it crafts this whole sort of multi-year plan to get that child to the point where they can fit into that social slot.
Yep.
So that is the logical extension of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember. There's a few like young adult sort of dystopian novels.
Right.
I feel, is City of Ember, is that one of them? I can't remember.
Yeah.
Where it's like when you turn 12, you're handed a slip of paper and that's your occupation,
Yep.
regardless of your aptitude. But that's exactly one of the questions is, even if it wasn't, the really dystopian side is, of course, there's an intentional or shadow,
right.
conglomerate.
But even if there isn't, you just tell that the AI makes society as vibrant as possible so we have a flourishing future.
Yep.
And this is one of the ways you do it. You engineer and manipulate individual people,
and then
so they fill certain roles.
And then it's when you kiss the ground or look to the skies and say, I hope we got this alignment problem figured out, because otherwise we're all going to be turned into paper clips.
Right, but even if we have, I mean, the question comes: what does it mean to be human?
What does it mean to be human?
Does being human mean being manipulated in a system so we have a predestined role that is designed for us, with the assumption that we're going to be happy in that role?
Yeah.
We tried that in society, and it doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, and I think, the real danger is because I think if you look at that as like an end product, I think almost, unless, I could be wrong, but I would assume almost all people would say, well, that's bad.
Right. Yes. So then what actually are we trying to achieve with agentic AI in education?
But I think the danger is each one of those steps is like a technological, oh, that's cool.
Yes,
we'll add
right,
one more,
yes,
we'll add
yes,
one more
yep.
capability. This will make it better.
Yes.
This will make it faster. This will make it more, whatever that. And then slowly, that's the problem, is these things it's not someone taking the dial and cranking it to 11.
Yep.
It's they turn it 1 degree at a time.
And
then it's a slow
you
boil
the frog.
Exactly.
Yes.
And then by the time you realize, you're like, wait a minute, I've been gated from what my heart's desire is since the time I was,
it has
in preschool.
overtones of genetic predestination.
It does.
The idea that
It's
you can tell,
yeah.
tell sort of where somebody's going from their genome, which we know you can't do. But now it's sort of saying, well, we're going to look at the whole sort of, I don't know what the omic version of it is, but
Sure.
everything that sort of defines you from sort of your genetic makeup, your environment, your emotional status, everything, that is used to determine what your pathway is.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the obvious question is, can you break out of that, or are you predetermined to follow that?
Yeah. I mean, I would like, the optimist in me too is like, even as awful as those things can be, or those steps, there will come a time, again, whether that pendulum is swinging,
right.
But it will be. I mean, the flower will find a way to bloom through the crack in the sidewalk.
Of course, yes.
Like these things will break through, and the hope is, though, again, this is why we ask these deep questions. Is like, we shouldn't wait until we're all covered with concrete to be like, we need a flower in here.
I know, yes.
Right?
We need to be talking about it now.
The time is now, so that the actions we can start thinking about today. Preserve or protect us from those types of I mean, that's why we talk about, again, and I don't want to get into this towards we've gone on long enough. I don't want to crack open a new thing here, but that's why, even the little intro we do, we literally mentioned the 3 futures, right? The possible, probable, and preferable.
Right.
That these are things that you can, to a certain degree, you can start to run essentially scenarios about what is likely to happen.
Right.
The more preferable or probable, you can get out into some wild, sort of speculative spaces.
Yep.
But again, the idea for that is to identify where you want to go, where you don't want to go, and then working backwards from that, or using this tool called backcasting to say, like, okay, so in 50 years, we don't want to be, human pods or whatever. So what do we do today? And then what do we do next year? And what happens if, coming back full circle to this, the AI policy thing coming out. So these things happen this way. What if they go bad? What if they go great?
Right.
And if those happen, what do you do when those events unfold?
That's it. Yes.
And being prepared for those events. And so that you can be along the way as you're inching forward, that you're always looking proactively of, okay, if this next breakthrough in agentic AI really happens, what does that mean? What are the things we should be prepared for if it goes sideways, or what are the things we should be prepared for to really launch if it goes well? So that it's not, oh, geez.
And being aware of those consequences.
Yeah.
And again, it comes back to this idea, if you're going fast and closing your eyes and just hoping you land in the right place, the chances are you'll land in the wrong place because you won't see all of the possibilities and all of the dangers.
Yep. And it's, I mean, you can think of an analogy too of like if you're running through the woods that have lots of forks in the woods, right?
Yes.
And you're trying to figure out, or like a maze, but you're sprinting it. Which way to go?
Yes.
It's hard when you're going that fast. It's hard to make a decision. You don't have time.
Yep.
And if you've made a decision, you can't go back without crashing or bumping, or you're like, so it becomes, you're sacrificing that sort of caution by just rushing.
Right.
And, it's not to say you can't get to the end by hitting it right at every time.
Yep.
But the more turns, the more bends, the more pathways, the less likely you're going to hit it on the first try.
I thought any gamer would get this.
Yeah.
If you go too fast and you get to the button that says press it and you haven't thought about what happens if you press it. Right. Yes.
It's like, whoops, well, something happens, know? But yeah, no, it's an incredibly interesting space. And it is a thing, which is why, I mean, again, coming, kind of if we switch on the futures lens, which is really fun to do, but that's why these sort of conversations and topics are so important, regardless of what domain people are into.
Agree. And I suspect some people are thinking that sort of this is crazy. We're just talking about an AI that is going to check my calendar, or it's going to sort of help sort of me through my lesson.
Yep.
How on earth can you extend it out this far? And yet, as you say, it's step by step. And if we're not thinking about where those steps go and where the decision points are, we'll end up in a place that we never intended to be.
Absolutely. And it's fun. There's great examples of these. There's a shipwreck example I give that is like, a good one to think, because in hindsight you're like, how did this happen? I mean, basically the the short of the long is this boat like hits the ground and runs up, and it's like no one was killed, but it was like the shipping container was damaged and destroyed and lots of billions of dollars or something. And the question was like, well, that was like a silly, dumb error. How did this happen? And you look back historically and it was going fast, being pressured, not thinking about and not taking advice or opportunities, and just being like, no, don't worry, I've got this under control. And they did not.
Anybody that studies risks, and especially big risks, will know that it's always the small things that somebody overlooks that lead to the big disasters. And it's so for instance, if you look at the some of the theory here, people say it's inevitable. And there's a school of thought that sort of talks about that. But also there's an important school of thought that says you can actually begin to reduce or minimize those if you are thinking through the consequences rather than just going so fast with your eyes closed that you forget about the small stuff.
That's it. And we won't even touch on black swans. Or any of that. We should do one on black swans.
There's so much to say. And I'm going to actually throw one more thing in as a provocative thought before we end, because we can't dig into this, but it's back to the education and agentic AI, because this has been going through my head, and it's asking the question, what does learning mean? Does learning, especially in K through 12, just mean learning facts? The answer we know is no. Does it mean learning sort of basic hardcore knowledge and principles, or does it involve a social and emotional component? And if it involves a social and emotional component, can you separate that out from the other forms of learning? And if you can't, how can we have agentic AI in education that doesn't also look at your emotional development and your social development as well as everything else? And if that is the case, who decides what a good social and emotional development is? I'm going to leave that hanging, because we ought to come back to this. Otherwise,
and I will. And speaking of that, I'll drop a link to a paper that I wrote with Dana Hendrickson and some other colleagues that was a literature review on generative AI in social emotional learning situations. And it's like, what's going on here, people? Because there's a massive component there. And that's one of the questions is, could something like this even begin to tackle the complexities of what that is and how it impacts us as learners at all ages, but certainly
to
in
be
K-12.
continued.
To be continued. That's a good. I need like dun dun dun. So we'll end there. I don't know where. I mean, I'm looking at this list. I'm like, we could talk about the consulting business and all that kind of stuff, but we go another time. It's just kind of funny to me that it's like, we need some cash. Yes, we'll do some consulting for you. It's like, really? Okay. But all right. Well, I've got my homework because I'm going to have to stuff a bunch of links, I think, into this episode. But that'll be fun. But Andrew, thank you. This is always, I mean,
Yep. Always fun.
It's when these
always
things,
longer than expected.
Always. Well, when these things drop and
I
it's
know.
like this massive US AI policy thing,
I know,
or, it's like, well, we've got to dive into that. And, and of course, we could probably do an hour on every single bullet point in there, just again, exploring and asking and challenging these questions of like, what are the possibilities, which good, bad, and in between.
But it all ties together. This question of what does it mean to develop AI responsibly so you actually have a flourishing society rather than a society that has been damaged because we didn't think before we moved.
Yep, exactly. And that's the key. That piece of it is trying to mitigate the unintended consequences. Because I think regardless of what side of the political aisle people are on, the goal, I believe, is a shared goal of being better off.
Yes.
Right now, we might argue and fight about how we get there, but that is ultimately, I think, every nation has that same goal of being, in a better place.
I think so, and that's where we should probably end because
we'll stop
starting up again.
I can feel the engine is turning again. No, that's fantastic. Well, thank you. And like I said, I'll stuff everything I can in the show notes. And we'll see you on the next episode.
See you next time.
Modem Futura.
And transmission.